I'd like to call this meeting to order of Orangeville Town Council for Monday, May the 30th, 2022. Could we have an approval of the agenda, please? Motion to approve the agenda. Councillor Andrews, second by Councillor Sherwood. All in favor? Thank you. Any disclosures of direct or indirect pecuniary interest? Seeing none. Okay, we're going to go into close now. I'm just going to read the reason for that. This is for a confidential verbal report from Ed Brennan, personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees and labor relations or employee negotiations. Do I have a motion to move into close, please?
Mr.
Councillor
Mayor?
Peter? Yes, Caroline?
Sorry to interject. I just wanted to include that it's also with respect to the May 16th, 2022 closed council minutes.
What she said.
Yes. Thank you.
Thank you, Carolina, for correcting me. Appreciate that. All right, Councillor Peters, second by Councillor Andrews, all in favor? Okay, we'll see you at the other link. Thank you. meeting of Orangeville Town Council for Monday, May 30th, 2022. We'd like to start with the singing of our national anthem.
O Canada, our home and native land, true patriot love in all of us command. With glowing hearts we see thee rise, the true north strong and free. From far and wide, O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. God keep our land glorious and free. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee. O Canada, we stand on guard for thee.
Thank you once again to David Nairn, the Artistic Director of Theatre Orangeville. We'd like to acknowledge the traditional territory of the Anishinaabe people, including the Ojibwe, Potawatomi, and Odawa of the Three Fires Confederacy. This meeting is being aired on public television and/or streamed live and may be taped for later public broadcast or webcast. Your name is part of the public record and will be included in the minutes of this meeting. Any member of the public connecting via telephone is reminded to press *6 to mute and unmute. Please remain muted until the chair requests comments or questions from the public. We had a closed meeting earlier today. So let me open that up again. Madam Clerk, I don't have it in front of me. Could you read the Risen report, please?
Yes, no problem. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, okay. Recommendation that closed minutes from May 16th, 2022 be approved, and that confidential verbal report from Ed Brennan, CAO, public office holder regarding personal matters about an identifiable individual, including municipal or local board employees and labor relations or employee negotiations, be received, and that staff proceed as directed.
Can we have a motion for that, please? Deputy Mayor McIntosh, seconded by Councillor Taylor. All in favor? Receive the minutes and that motion as well for the other item. All right, thank you. Moving on to item 10. This is adoption of minutes of previous council meetings. So we have the May the 9th, 2022 public meeting minutes. We also have the May 16th council minutes. Can we have a motion to receive those minutes, please? Councillor Taylor, seconded by Councillor Andrews. Any comments or corrections there? No? All in favor? Thank you. Moving on to item 11. This is presentations, petitions, and delegations. 11.1, we have Mr. Hartway, Josh Hartway from the Orangeville Otter Swim Club. Mr. Hartway.
Hi, how are you?
Fine, thank you.
All right, so am I going to be sharing my screen and doing the presentation, or how do we start this?
Yeah, if you could. We can't see your handsome demeanor there, but oh, there he is. Okay.
There you are.
Yeah. Sure. If you'd like to share your presentation and then speak to it, that would be great.
Sure. Let me see if I can get this in. Can everybody see that?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. So I'm here tonight, thank you for having me, talk about the addition of a head wall or bulkhead for the Alder pool. This is something we talked about in early design, but got lost in translation through the way, I would assume. So what this piece is it sits at the start end of the pool. I'll go through a little bit about that. So you can see a picture in the background. This piece hides the wiring elevates the deck and gives space for different electronics used in competitions. Also provides a wide platform for disabled or young swimmers and reduces the height of the dive blocks for younger or disabled swimmers. It's a very important piece for many reasons, especially in the competitive world of swimming. You can see those yellow pads along the front there. Those are part of the electronic system. We'll go through a little bit more about how they're mounted and why it's important to have all that. But when you're putting in a caliber pool that's going into Alder, it's really kind of a no-brainer to add this piece. It's a fundamental piece for many reasons. Again, I said safety, conceals the wiring, helps with younger swimmers. The other thing too is it's revenue. We just hosted a meet in Markham 2 weekends ago on the long weekend. We had 675 swimmers, 16 clubs from the province, as far away as Elliott Lake. So brings in a lot of the type of pool you have brings in a different caliber of meet. Having the right electronics, the right pool, generally speaking, a better pool is going to produce better times. So people are willing to travel and come to those events. It's another view. This is the Markham pool actually that we were at, hosting the meet there. As you can see, it's a nice stable platform, hides all the electronic wiring and everything that would be wired in the deck, gives you access for repair if needed be, provides a really stable platform for swimmers. The pool right there is the Owen Sound pool actually. You can see that without a bulkhead, the height of those dive blocks, which can be quite daunting for a young swimmer or a swimmer with disabilities learning how to dive. It's also important for different types of events. If you're doing backstroke, would be one. There are certain types of ledges that allow for a proper start. Again, this is all pieces of equipment that really matter when you're, hosting a proper meet or teaching proper technique to swimmers. You can see I've got two demonstrations, one with a bulkhead to the left here, which has a touchpad there, and one without the bulkhead. And you can see how the electronic touchpads have to be mounted mid-water. And then that reduces the ability to get out of the lane properly. So you'd have to have swimmers clearing 8 lanes left to right. So a bit of congestion, bit of an issue when you're doing a meet, having turnover, and a bit of a safety issue. There's wiring, trip hazards, things like that. And the reason it's important to have those touch pads at mid-water is the touch. Swimmers swim at the water level, and when they come in, if it's below the water, you're going to miss about 65% of the touches, rendering the electronic system kind of useless. Again, another slide here showing some of the advantages of having the bulkhead, having it wired in, having the ability to work on it without having to pull up concrete or tile, should there be an electrical issue. And it really hosts well with this electric timing system I keep talking about. The Otters have committed $90,000 to buy a state-of-the-art timing system for the Alder pool. We have already contacted the vendor for that, sourced it, and are placing the order this summer. So we will be adding this Omega timing system to the Alder pool. Again, back to what I was saying, is having this type of pool makes Orangeville more of a destination for sports. The Otters over the years have built a really good reputation in officiating, hence why we were able to have almost 700 swimmers on a long weekend, Markham from as far away as Elliott Lake. So it really comes down to having the proper space to host events, the proper space to teach swimming. We've got a few swimmers now that have earned some Olympic trial times, and hopefully in the coming years, maybe even make it to trials or on Olympic teams. So having this type of pool is going to bring in the people, hopefully build the club, build the community, and give a lot more to that pool. And, when you're putting the kind of money you have into it, it's kind of like building an ice rink without putting the boards or a scoreboard in. And it'd be a shame not to have this and not have the proper setup. Again, the cost versus reward. So I don't have the quote. I've spoken with Ray Osman on this several times, and I believe the cost is around $220,000. And just looking at it from hosting 3 to 4 meets a year with a 2 to 3 day meet, bringing in 1,200 families over the course of a year for these. I mean, easily could spend $150 a day when you're looking at hotels, food, gas, groceries. Out of our almost 700 swimmers, I would say about 60 to 70% of the families were staying over for multiple days, 2 to 3 days, some even 4. So it is a big revenue generator for the community, and it is a thing. If you have the pool, they will come, so to speak. If you build it, they will come. So, I think that it is a very valuable piece to this pool, and in my eyes, a small commitment in comparison to what we've already, or what has been spent from this pool. And that's it for my slideshow.
Okay. We have Councillor Taylor asked to ask a question. Go ahead, Councillor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Mr. Hartway, thank you for your presentation. One of the things that's always disappointed me about this pool, like, first of all, I was so grateful when it opened. I remember the day this facility opened, and we were missing it for sure, but it was a surprise to me that it was never set up properly to have these meets. And to me, it's always been a miss. And I've talked to other people within your organization about the big miss that it is. Mm-hmm. And then to hear this today and see it, I'm just curious, my goal would be to have this set up so that, real tournaments can come, and exactly the vision that you have. Like, why have it and be halfway? We do this. Is there other things that we're missing as well? Or is this is this the Grand Slam home run for you and the Otters are happy and we're going to run first class programs?
100%. Yes, we will be able to run first class programs. The minimum standard for hosting like a regional or championship event on a 25-meter short course pool is 8 lanes. You need 8 lanes. Second piece is the proper electronics. So for us as a club, I mean, we've been fundraising, we've been getting money, donations, things like that. The $90,000 electronic package that we're looking at is, Swiss Omega is the top of the line system. Right. And the Otters have committed to spend that and put it in. Part of that will be a new scoreboard, because the scoreboard that we have in currently will not work with the new system. So new scoreboard, new electronics, and it just makes all of this a lot more easier. Setup, tear down. Those things matter, right? And it's a safety thing too. I mean, as I was showing in some of those slides, the wires are hidden. You don't have the trip hazards around the blocks. And, the bulkhead is really good for teaching young swimmers how to dive, because it is a bit elevated, a few inches off the water level. So it builds a comfort level until you can get them up to a dive block. And it's less of a challenge too, the height of the dive block. So my long-winded answer is yes, this will this will attract a lot of high-end meets. We've already had a basic commitment, should this all go through, that in 2024 we will host a regional championship event in Orangeville.
That's great. And you're getting your 8 lanes as part of this, just to be clear. You referenced that, but that's part of that renovation.
Yes.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
All right. I'm not sure who was first there, Councillor Andrews or Deputy Mayor?
Deputy Mayor was.
Deputy Mayor, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Worship. This certainly makes a lot of sense to me. I will definitely support it. I just wanted Mr. Osmond, what's his thoughts on this?
Mr. Osmond.
Thank you, Your Worship. Through to Deputy Mayor McIntosh. Well, first off, I'd like to thank Josh for the presentation. And, it all comes down to what level of service you want to deliver. And if you want to have certain caliber of competition in your pool, then you can definitely do the head wall. One of the things we did with the head wall is that we did allow for the steel pads, so the head wall can go in at any time in the future while we're doing the design. We looked at doing the pool. Our first priority was make the pool 8 lanes. The 8-lane change in that pool was, as you know, the pool right now is sitting at 3.7 million, plus the additional dollars that we spent on the columns, steel columns, which really wasn't into the pool. But as Josh points out, I mean, the head wall itself, there's a lot of great features with the head wall in terms of timing equipment, how you start meets, what caliber meet you can actually host. And, the design we have now will give you the ability to host events and do trials and that sort of thing at a certain level. And what, Josh is pointing out is that you're actually raising the bar. And, right now in the sport world, and as Josh has already pointed out as well, they do use the Markham Pool, the Pan Am Center, because it's designed for a certain caliber, high competition training for the Olympics and so on and so forth. And we have seen in Orangeville, certainly in the last couple of years, probably even more than that, maybe 3 years or so, we've seen the caliber of the swimmer, definitely improve. And some of these swimmers are swimming at, university level and pre-Olympic level, and it's about training. And, really what we're asking a question to council here is whether or not you want to invest more dollars into the pool and actually to invest in delivering a program for a higher caliber of swim meet. And I can't argue, won't argue with what Mr. Hartway, Josh has pointed out. It does give you the ability to do that. But the main focus of our pool when we designed it was first and foremost to take care of our primary users, which is lessons. And the primary users are lessons and recreational swims. And the swim meets has grown. I don't know if Josh alluded to it. I didn't hear it. I think he's around 250 members now are in the swim team and growing. So at the end of the day, it really comes down to council making a decision on whether he wants to change from the caliber you can host at this point to a higher caliber. And when it comes down to the safety features and those kinds of things, they're legitimate. I mean, you can, when this is designed, it will cover over the timing equipment and all the wiring is there, sitting in the deck, and essentially things can happen. In terms of timing, right now, I mean, we're still installing the pool. The stainless steel is being fabricated and all these kinds of things. The price on that, I would definitely have to take this back. When we did the pricing on this some months ago, we were looking at somewhere in the vicinity of $220,000 to $240,000. And in recent weeks, in discussing things with the contractor, and I'm glad we had a contract because the pound of stainless steel went from $2 a pound up to $8 a pound. So that may change our cost estimates. So I need to take that back and give council a better idea of what the exact price would be if they want to move in that direction.
Thank you, Mr. Osmond. Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Your Worship. And Mr. Osmond, thank you for answering one of my questions. I truly appreciate the detail that you have provided to council this evening regarding this, request. And from the timing perspective, I'm hoping if we decide to head whatever direction, that it could be slotted in, as you've indicated. It seems to be possible based on the construction timeline. I just wanted to make a comment to Mr. Hartway that big believer in the Otters swim program. And, I think we need to have, a destination as we're very much aware of, the town has invested in our new tourism branding. We need to ensure that sports tourism is a key part of that. And I think that this would be certainly one of those, premier opportunities to kind of jump on and support. I take a look at my wife's background, who was a competitive swimmer, and some of her fond memories are, in fact, some of the opportunities that she had competitively to, swim. And I think that, creating those memories is very important, not only for our homegrown athletes here, but also to showcase our homegrown athletes nationally and internationally. And what a great way to do something like that by having something like this in our own backyard. So I, like the Deputy Mayor, I firmly support at least investigating and seeing where this goes. Thank you.
Thank you.
Councillor Peters.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Through you, if I could just get some clarification on the cost. So if we take the head wall cost at 220, is the 90 that the Otters are proposing to chip in part of that 220 or in addition to that 220?
In addition. There also changes the cost. The 90,000 is based on a head wall. Should the head wall not go in, there's some other wiring aspects to how we set up the electronics. Or you go Bluetooth, which we know there's a problem with Bluetooth communicating to scoreboards. So it changes a little bit You know, when we first went down this road, we thought we could reuse the scoreboard, add a couple line segments for the extra 2 lanes, but the new Swiss Omega system doesn't talk with the current system, so that was an extra cost that we didn't plan on.
Okay, thanks. I mean, I'd certainly like to see what the more detailed numbers are and how things might work out. I think this is the right time to build it in if we're going to, but that said, you know, there's a number of sports and recreation facilities across town that could use some improvements. And at $220,000, you can do a lot to baseball fields and soccer pitches and skate parks and, you know, that kind of thing. So it's a big ask for the middle of a budget year. And I'd prefer to see a staff report on it before voting in favor.
Right. Agreed. Councillor Post.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. My comments were going to be similar to Councillor Peters, that I'm very supportive of this, but I would like to see a staff report with broken down costs, and also perhaps from the treasurer how we can pay for it and where those funds would come. I do think that this is the opportune time to add it in if we're going to. We're already at a point where we've invested a significant amount of money into the pool, and we want to make sure that it's done the right way and where it can be of most use and most contribution back to the community. And I think we have an opportunity to do that. Mr. Hartway, I'm very thankful for your presentation. I learned more about a head wall of a pool than I ever thought I'd know before. So I very much appreciate that. And I'm starting to understand how that will be a big investment for us. So thank you for your time, and I look forward to a staff report. And yeah, I anticipate that I will be supportive once I see a staff report.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Post. Mr. Hartway, so the 90,000, where did those funds come from? Is that of coffers? Did you fundraise in some other way? Yeah,
it's been fundraising over the years before COVID. We've gotten some corporate donations. We were able to get some CEVA loans, so through the pandemic. So we'll be using some of those funds. And we'll probably truth be told, we'll have to do a little bit more fundraising over the summer, to be honest with you. It's more than what we thought we could spend, and we're working hard to get it because we understand what it means to have that type of system. And the head wall, the system, it brings in the meets, it brings in the revenue, brings in the people, and it makes a big difference. We were at Markham, and we have kids that are 10, 11 years old now that have never seen a proper swimming pool other than Tony Rose. And Tony Rose is getting the job done for us, but it's nowhere near the caliber of what those pools would be or what Alder Pool could be, right? So I think it's pretty amazing that we're able to take those kids out of the Learn to Swim program. My daughter was one. She did the Learn to Swim with Orangeville, and she, out of COVID, got an Olympic trials time, and she's 14 years old. So, I mean, I've seen it work. I've seen it work from the start to the finish, so to speak, and I think there's a lot more kids that could benefit from having a proper pool, and community could benefit from it. I mean, like I said, we had people coming from Elliott Lake, so that's kind of cool to have, such a far reach.
Just wondering if you've done any outreach to any of the service clubs, for instance, in town. I know that it's been tough on all service clubs over the pandemic, but they're starting to get the legs back underneath each other. We've got the Rotary Rib Fest coming up. Lions Club just finished their Spring Home and Garden Show. There is money in the coffers in some of those service clubs, so just a thought, you might want to do a presentation like this to some of those service clubs and see if you can shake some shekels free over there.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Hartway. So I think what we are going to do is have a motion here to send this back to Mr. Osmond and his staff for a further review, staff report, and developing a more comprehensive costing on this. So could we have a motion to that effect, folks? Deputy Mayor, seconded by Councillor Peters. Any further comments? All in favor?
Yes.
All right. Thank you for your presentation, Mr. Hartway. I think, we collectively, I think, want to see this happen. We need to see a little bit more detail from Mr. Osmond on it and where to slot it into our budget process. So we'll work on it, but it would be helpful if perhaps the auditors could do some outreach, as I said, and bring some additional good news back in the future to us on these matters.
Will do.
All right, sir. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay, we're going to move on to our second presentation, welcoming Mr. Murray Short. partner at RLB LLP. He's going to present regarding the audited financial statements for the town of Orangeville. Welcome, Mr. Short, and welcome, Madam Treasurer, who will ride shotgun tonight and be dealing with the staff report coming up shortly after your presentation. So over to you, Mr. Short.
Great. Thank you very much. Everybody can hear me okay?
Yes.
Okay, I'm just going to share my screen here. So you should now see the front page of a presentation that we have prepared. So a little different from what we've done in the past. We're walking through a presentation which highlights some of those graphs and things that we would have shown after walking through the financial statements in prior years. This presentation incorporates some of the financial statements, so I'll cover those off, and then in doing so, won't need to spend as much time on the financial statements themselves. So just to start, I'll talk a little bit about the audit process, our audit report, and then the financial statements, including some of those graphs, and then just next steps in terms of finalizing the financial statements, as well as the financial information return, which is due to the ministry tomorrow as it winds up. So first off, a bit of an overview on our audit process itself. So in any audit, we come up with a number that we consider to be material to the financial statements, and that's what allows us to sign off on our audit report. For the town of Orangeville, that number is $2.2 million, which sounds like a whole lot. What that number is an amount that's considered to be significant enough to make significant impacts at the organizational level, the governance level, or council level, to the decision making of the organization. That number is important for us from the standpoint of our audit in terms of being able to sign off on our audit report, as I said. But what that means conceptually is that we could, in theory, have any number less than that of uncorrected misstatements in the financial statements and still sign off on our audit report. With that said, we look at testing at much lower dollar thresholds, depending on the type of testing we do. We'll use a number of random sampling techniques that could test $20 transactions just as readily as $20,000 transactions. We'll do test of controls that test sign-offs and approvals on processes that make sure that there's a lessened risk of error occurring in the financial statements. And then we use various testing thresholds as well that are much smaller percentages of that total number. So, and then in aggregate, I can tell you that the unadjusted differences are entirely insignificant to the financial statement. So we don't get anywhere close to that level when it comes to any unadjusted amounts. Happy to report that we have had the full cooperation of the finance team, the treasurer, and the finance department staff. We didn't have any concerns in terms of internal controls, any challenges with differences of opinion when it comes to accounting estimates, judgments made by management, accounting policy choices, or anything along those lines, and have no issues or recommendations to make coming out of our process. We don't also have any independence issues, so the independence is important when it comes to an audit in terms of being able to perform an audit with an unbiased view. We can't have any vested interest in the financial results of the municipality, otherwise we wouldn't be able to sign off on our audit report as independent auditors, so no concerns from that standpoint. The adjusting entries that are reflected in the financial statements are standard adjusting entries that we would make for financial statement presentation purposes, balancing some of the funds, the tangible asset activity, and then entries that were brought to us by management, which is kind of par for the course oftentimes when we're undergoing an audit process. So nothing unusual to note there. The audit report itself, which we'll see in the financial statements, it is a clean audit opinion. So this slide is just to highlight the fact that we have done our audit in accordance with Canadian generally accepted auditing standards. And our conclusion or our opinion is that the financial statements are presented fairly in accordance with Canadian public sector accounting standards. So the first statement that we'll get to is the statement of financial position. So this is the balance sheet for municipal and other government organizations. It shows a snapshot of the assets, liabilities, and ultimately the equity or accumulated surplus for the municipality. So some of the key things to focus on are things like cash and cash equivalents, which includes investments, taxes receivable, tangible capital assets, and your accumulated surplus. So just showing that statement here on this slide, I'll point out a few things. When looking at cash and cash equivalents, which I mentioned was one of the key areas to consider, we're looking at the top 3 lines. So cash, restricted cash, and temporary investments in total are down about $3 million. So that's coming as a result of a significant investment in capital assets in the year. The municipality spent about $13 million on capital assets. That is actually a fair amount less than what was budgeted, just because of projects not carrying forward at the anticipated rate. But those that did go forward were financed primarily through cash. There was no new debt taken in the year, which was one of the vehicles to finance some of the budgeted capital asset activity in the year. So a bit of a decrease on your cash position overall. Taxes receivable, you can see, is down from about 2.7 million to about 2.3 or 2.4. We're seeing that fairly consistently across a lot of our municipalities, municipal clients this year, I should say, with COVID kind of impacting everybody quite significantly, or more significantly in 2020. A lot of municipalities let their tax arrears kind of creep up a little bit, sometimes waived interest on and lessened their collection activities. That seems to have reversed itself with a little more focus on collecting on those taxes receivable, and your municipality is no different. Accounts receivable other than taxes receivable, you can see are up by about 500,000. That is a combination of various receivables from recreation and other user fees, as well as HST rebates, which are up fairly significantly this year. The investment in government business enterprises, so that's your investment in Orangeville Hydro. That amount is up because Orangeville Hydro had a profit this year in excess of the dividends that were paid to the municipality in the year, and so that balance has increased. In the liability section, you can see there's a number of balances there. There's a promissory note that has been paid down, as well as the long-term debt line. You can see both down just because of the regular repayments on those debts. We have accounts payable, and you can see that balance is also down by almost half. That's just because of timing differences of payments, some staffing costs higher in 2020 than 2021 on the payable side. And then deferred revenue is primarily some obligatory reserve funds, your development charges, gas tax, and other obligatory reserve funds. And we'll show that in note 6, but that balance is fairly comparable in aggregate. Lastly, in the liability section, we have some post-employment and landfill liabilities. Those are kind of assessed liabilities to the municipality relating to post-employment costs, as well as future costs for landfill site maintenance and closure costs. So those balances are just at assessed amounts and fairly comparable to the year before. Net of all of those things is your net financial asset. So while your cash position did decrease overall, your net financial asset position has increased. And that's because part of the reason your cash has decreased as well is because of the repayment of some of those debts, as well as the accounts payable that I mentioned. Down the bottom of the page, we have non-financial assets, most notably your tangible capital assets, and that balance is up. You can see by about $5.3 million or 5.4 because of the additions in the year of about 13 million, exceeding the amortization taken in the year of about 7.7. So net of all of those things is an accumulated surplus totaling almost 246 million, up from 236 the year before. So about a $10 million increase, which we'll see on the next page. Part of the reason for that is that because some of the capital activity that was budgeted to occur didn't, we see a fairly significant increase in your reserves and reserve funds. And we'll see that on a future schedule as well. So in terms of graphs, as we have in the last year, we're comparing Orangeville to other comparably sized municipalities. So as we've mentioned in the past, many of our municipal clients are kind of rural municipalities in Dufferin and Wellington County, fair amount smaller than Orangeville. And so rather than compare to our other municipal clients, we're comparing to other comparable municipalities of similar size. And so what I can say here on this page is this blue line is the line for other comparable municipalities. The green line is the town of Orangeville. What this means is that you're holding more cash at the end of the year than other similar sized municipalities. It's a strong position to be in. I'm not in no way suggesting you're holding too much, but you are holding about 125% of your annual cash outflows in cash at the end of the year. So that's because of the status of your reserves and reserve funds, municipalities in a strong financial position. The next graph is showing taxes receivable as a percentage of total tax levied. So this is comparing your taxes receivable balance that I talked about, that I mentioned has decreased, to the total of all taxes levied by the municipality, including those raised for and paid out to the county and school boards. So your balance at the end of the year is 3.6%. Other comparable municipalities are about 5%. And so your taxes receivable position is in a really, really good position. The Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing considers anything less than 10% to be low risk. And so the fact that you're at 3.6 suggests that your taxes receivable are under control, that the town staff has done a good job on collections and hasn't allowed those to creep up and get too high. So the next graph is long-term debt as a percentage of total tax revenue, and in total, the town of Orangeville has less debt on average than the comparable size municipalities that we're using as a comparator group. About 35% of your total tax revenue sitting in long-term debt versus about 57% from other comparable municipalities. So again, good position. Your organization has strong cash resources and a very reasonable amount of debt for its size. When comparing capital asset additions to as a percentage of total tax revenue, your municipality is showing as somewhat lower. I do caution when making these comparisons that we're not judging. Every municipality has different infrastructure needs depending on the municipality and the type of services it offers. This may vary very significantly from one municipality to another, so I wouldn't want to suggest that you are not spending as much as you need to. But on average, relative to similar sized municipalities, your spend on capital assets is somewhat lower. This graph shows three different things. First one is the blue bar in each year is the actual capital asset additions. The green bar is the budgeted additions, and the yellow bar is your amortization. So when we compare the blue and yellow, as auditors, we're comparing your additions to your amortization to try and understand how the organization is spending on its infrastructure relative to how much its infrastructure is aging. It's not a perfect comparison, but I can tell you that in 4 of the 5 years that you're spending more than your amortization, that's a suggestion that you're probably at least reasonably keeping up with your capital asset needs. The green amount is your budget additions. There was a substantial amount to be spent on capital assets in the year. It's not surprising that the green bar is often higher than the blue, just because of the timing of projects. Sometimes things don't carry forward, sometimes because of construction delays, because of supply chain issues and other things that projects don't proceed as fast as they were intended to. And so it's not at all surprising to see that. The other thing I'll mention is that sometimes when a project is sitting in your capital budget for 1 year and isn't spent, it may then be also shown in the capital budget for the following year. And so there might be a bit of duplication on the budget side just because of the timing of projects. And when you're kind of revisiting the budget for the next year, that you need to kind of plan to use those funds that you hadn't spent from the previous year. So just a few comments there. But again, the comparison that we look at most closely is the blue versus the yellow, and you're spending in excess of what your amortization is on your assets. This graph shows funding sources for those capital asset additions. In 2021, there was a portion that we're treating as unfinanced. That amount is amount that was budgeted to be financed by debt. So as I mentioned, you didn't take any new debt in the year. Some of the projects that did occur in the year in terms of capital assets were budgeted to be financed by debt. And so that didn't need to be the case, but then it will be recovered from future revenues for the municipality. The two kind of shades of green here are your reserves and reserve funds. The lighter green is the obligatory reserve funds. That's your development charges, gas tax, recreational land, and other obligatory reserve funds. The bluer shade of green is your discretionary reserve funds. Those are funds set aside by council as well as your reserves. And so you can see that those are funding a significant amount of your capital asset additions. And then the orange is tax levy. So you're funding some of those municipalities from your taxes as well as some other sources. In terms of the statement of operations, so this is the income statement, if you will, for the municipality, showing the revenues, expenses, and by department, and then your surplus and accumulated surplus. And so just to walk through this fairly quickly, you can see taxation revenue actually down very slightly from the year before. Fees and user charges fairly comparable and hadn't bounced back to the extent that was budgeted. So not surprisingly, I think COVID lasted and has continued to last for a lot longer than any of us expected. And so not surprising that your fees and user charges would be impacted. Grants will vary based on a number of things, most notably capital projects. Some of the revenue that you would have received in grants was not spent because of capital asset projects didn't necessarily proceed as fast, and so again, some of that may be in those reserves and reserve funds. So unspent means that it's not showing in revenue. Similarly, in other income, that's where you would have development charges that are spent in the year, and that was impacted by projects not proceeding. Your equity income in Orangeville Hydro, so that's your income from that investment, and that amount was fairly comparable to the year before. So total revenues you can see down by about 800,000 year over year. But similarly, we do see a more pronounced, in fact, decrease in the expenses, most notably in the protection services line. Oh, sorry. So the annual surplus on the year, 10.3 million. That's that increase in your accumulated surplus that I mentioned on the last page, and you can see the increase here up to 245 million. Most of that being your investment in tangible capital assets that I'll show on a future page. So just in terms of some of the graphs here, as a kind of diversified municipality, you have a wide range of services offered, protection services being the most significant one in terms of expenses, transportation, general government, and environmental services, all fairly comparable in terms of overall expenses. And as we have in the past, we show the comparison over a 5-year time frame. The next statement is the statement of changes in net financial assets. So this is kind of a comparison of your liquid assets. We have a separate cash flow statement, but this is kind of aggregating all the financial assets net of your liabilities. So it kind of backs out the activity from the capital assets in the year. So we're starting with the annual surplus of 10.3 million. This is kind of removing the effects of your tangible capital asset activity, as well as the changes in some of those other non-financial assets. And ultimately, your net financial assets increased by about $5 million. Again, that's largely because of the increase in your reserves and reserve funds. Lastly, we have the statement of cash flows. Just a few things to highlight here. I won't go through line by line. About the middle of the page, we have the net change in cash from operating activities. So you, as an organization from your operations, you're generating positive cash flow, so about $11.3 million. From that, then you are spending money on your financing activity, which is repayment of debt, which was about 2.2 or 2.3. You're also then spending money on capital assets, which was 13 million. And then you receive some dividends from Orangeville Hydro. So net of those things is a decrease in cash of 3 million that I mentioned back on the statement of financial position. So last schedule I'll highlight is the schedule of accumulated surplus. Overall accumulated surplus, again, up by that $10 million, up to $245 million from $235 the year before. Most of that being your investment in tangible capital assets, secondarily your reserves and reserve funds, which, as I mentioned, have increased from 51 million up to 59 million. Other than that, you have some liabilities, so the long-term debt and unfunded liabilities that are going to be rate paid down, that we're financing your capital asset purchases, those post-employment benefits and closure costs, and then the general surplus, which I know that council has an interest in terms of just your operating surplus, about 1.3 million at the end of the year. So last schedule I'll show her, it's actually a note to the financial statements, is the deferred revenue note. So this is just showing the obligatory reserve funds that I mentioned, which are obviously also of interest to council and to the municipality. So as I mentioned, fairly comparable in aggregate. You do see some changes. Fair amount spent out of development charges in the year, 2.3 million. So that balance is down. But you can see offsets on some of the others. You didn't spend all the gas tax monies received in the year, only about 357,000 out of the 1.8 million received. And so that reserve fund has increased. So still a fair amount set aside in those obligatory reserve funds to cover future costs. And just to show the reserves and reserve funds compared to other municipalities, since we're showing a lot of other key metrics in that way, your reserves and reserve funds are better funded than the average of other municipal governments of your size. If you take those reserves and reserve funds as a percentage of total tax revenue, the average of the other municipalities we used as comparators were about 178%. You're at about 206. So again, with a strong cash position, your reserves and reserve funds are well funded. Again, I'll caution, similar to as I did before, this is not a projection on what your needs will be, so I couldn't comment on that. That's a job for engineers, not accountants. But in terms of just the pure dollar value sitting in those reserves and reserve funds, relative to other similar municipalities, that we would say that you're in good shape. In terms of next steps, we'll communicate with management just to confirm that subsequent to our field work, that there's been no changes in anything that would impact our financial statements and our ability to sign off on the audit report. We don't anticipate anything along those lines. Subject to your approval of the financial statements, then we'll provide our final signed copy of the financial statements with our signed audit report. And then the financial information return has been drafted and is ready to be submitted very shortly. So with that, I guess I can open it up to questions. I did cover most of the financial statements, so I will defer to council as to whether you want me to walk through those as well, but it would be kind of repeating a lot of what I've already said. So what I will do is I'll stop sharing and entertaining questions that council may have at this point. With your permission, Mr. Mayor. Otherwise, as I said, I'm happy to go through the statements if you'd like.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Short. Councillor Taylor.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Thank you, Mr. Short, for your presentation. I read it yesterday with great interest, and then your color commentary today filled in a few more blanks for me, so I appreciate that. Just being nosy and not relevant to the end result of your presentation, but I'm always curious who those comparators are. Would you just be able to share who those other tiny towns are that we're compared to? I'm just curious.
I will find that for you if you give me a moment. I just need to look through something in my file here.
I guess while you're looking, my observation is, I mean, maybe we should be giving the treasurer a raise. I'm not sure, but it feels like kudos if in terms of us versus the comparison. I mean, to me, whenever you're looking at these things, you need to ground it in something. You know, if you make $1 million a year, you may think you're wealthy, and then you realize, wait a second, everybody else makes $2 million a year. Kind of shame on me, but it's great to see it that way.
Yeah, so the municipalities that we're looking at, we went by based on population, ones that were slightly above and slightly below. I think when we first did this comparator last year, we were looking at 3 or 4 above and 3 or 4 below. So some of the ones would include Bradford, West Gwillimbury, Center Wellington, Leamington, Whitchurch, Stouffville, Woodstock, Woolwich, There might be one or two others, but that's kind of the similar size municipalities that we were using as a basis.
That's very helpful. Thank you. I did a snippet of your debt piece too that makes you feel good about where we are versus our competitors. So thank you, sir.
Sure.
Thanks, Councillor Taylor. On to Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Your Worship, and Mr. Short, always a pleasure to see you at council meetings. I always like to dive into numbers, and we have some very positive news here from what you've presented. And kudos to Madam Treasurer and her team. They've done an incredible job to position ourselves where we are. I did notice on the, I guess, the tangible capital assets page, and this probably is referenced more to Madam Treasurer, but if I recall, I'm trying to remember how many council meetings ago, but you had referenced, Madam Treasurer, about capital grants, and you had highlighted something about access to those. Just, again, from my vantage point, where are we with some of those potential capital grants? I know we've been able to garner some, but do we have any that might be in the pipeline that could also provide some positive support?
Madam Treasurer.
Your Worship, to Councillor Andrews. So if you would recall from Mr. Murray's presentation of the funding sources and the graph that he has shown, capital grants actually is probably the lowest funding sources for our capital budget. So we have, if I have to broadly categorize, we have two separate buckets. One is more the predictable grants that we get, the ones that we really don't have to apply for, the gas tax, provincial or federal, the OCIF, the Ontario Community Infrastructure Funding. So those are the ones that we qualify based on our population and other factors. The ones that we pursue, the ones that we apply for, so there are quite a few in the pipeline, and so the audited financial statements are from 2021. So since then, we have moved on to 2022 budget. Now, if council wishes, I can in a future report, provide some more insight into it. For now, what I can provide you, Councillor Andrews, is that we have all our predictable grants very fairly in line, and the ones that we are pursuing, some of it are in the pipeline, and some of them are the results and the outcomes are yet to be determined.
Well, thank you. I look forward to a possibility of getting some further updates, but again, truly appreciate the report that Mr. Short has provided, and again, the work that you and your team have done to position ourselves in a great spot. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Deputy Mayor.
Thank you, Worship. First of all, thank you, Mr. Short, for the presentation. One of my pet peeves has always been our reserves. I know previous councils used to automatically increase the reserves, which was probably good. I know we kind of come along as a council and stopped increasing reserves. In the last few years, we've kind of kept them leveled off. So it's really glad to hear that our reserves are still above what some places are, and we're in a good position by the sounds of it as far as reserves. I always ask you in the past to comment if we have enough reserves, but you answered the question and it looks like we do. So thank you for that.
Sure. Again, I will just add the caveat though that we can't assess what your future needs are. We can only assess what the status of your reserves relative to other municipalities. But from that standpoint, certainly, I would say that you're in good shape.
Very good. Well, Councillor Taylor, you wish to ask another question?
Well, if I may, Your Worship, I think the Deputy Mayor just had a good point on reserves and debt and whatnot. And I was just curious, I have bothered the Treasurer on this point in the past, but I would love to hear your opinion, Mr. Short. The line of credit that we currently have within our debt levels, and we're just paying the interest on it. Would you have an opinion on that, sir, and just in terms of good, bad, and different?
Yes, I would have an opinion. A certain amount of debt is reasonable and prudent to use to finance large capital projects, other kind of significant but maybe unanticipated larger expenditures. It kind of gives the municipality the opportunity to kind of spread the burden of those larger costs over a period of time. Certainly for some of your infrastructure needs, they're going to benefit the community for decades to come in terms of significant transportation, environmental services expenditures, and those sorts of things. And so, using debt prudently to fund some of those larger expenditures often is a reasonable alternative. I think if you consider the town of Orangeville's debt position, which I as mentioned was lower than the average of our municipality of the comparable municipalities, and your cash position being higher suggests that the municipality, the town of Orangeville, has used debt reasonably and expeditiously in making some of those decisions. So I certainly wouldn't suggest that you're over leveraged from a debt standpoint, but that the municipality has used debt on occasion, and I think quite reasonably.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Short. So I just wanted to, again, I think on behalf of council, give kudos to our Treasury Department led by Madam Nandini Syed and her team. Looking forward to seeing the version of budget that is always interesting, the graphic presentation that our team has put together, award-winning in the last 2 or 3 years. So that's yet to come, Madam Treasurer, and we look forward to that. But again, kudos to you, and thank you to Mr. Short and his team for working together to provide these financial statements. With anybody watching can only feel pride in Orangeville and in how the town is managing fiscally our budgetary processes, and you know, we're in good financial health, clearly. And thank you again to everyone, all town staff who's working on this, and of course council, to get us into this position. So thank you, Mr. Short. We will move on now to our staff reports, but thank you. I'm sure you'll be hanging in case there's any questions. So let's move on to 12.1. This is the audited financial statement and staff report. Madam Treasurer, do you wish to add to what has been said so far?
Thank you, Worship. Through you to council, the report is fairly self-explanatory. So you have heard Mr. Murray present our audited financial statements and our financial health as of December 31st, 2021. We did realize a general surplus, and I always make the distinction because some of the numbers Mr. Murray was talking about are essentially non-cash. So the cash general surplus that we have realized for 2021 is 1.35 million, which is slightly down from the previous year of 1.9 million, although not surprising given that 2021 was really the year of COVID. That said, the recommendation tonight clearly is for council to approve our financial audit statements, as well as provide me direction to park the cash surplus in our general capital reserve fund. Council will have an opportunity to deliberate on this particular fund when we get into 2023 budget deliberation.
Let me read the recommendation, and maybe we can have a motion to put this on the floor. And if there's any further questions of council to Madam Treasurer, we can do that. The recommendation is that report CPS 2022-049 regarding the 2021 audited financial statements be received, and the council approve the audited consolidated financial statements of the corporation of the town of Orangeville and the statements of trust funds as presented, and the council directs the treasurer to allocate the 2021 general surplus of $1,359,771 to the general capital reserve fund. Could we have a motion there, please? Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Sherwood. All right, council, do you have any further questions? Councillor Taylor, go ahead, sir.
Yes, thank you, Your Worship. Through you to our treasurer. Nadine, I'm just curious, you know, to me, you can put into reserves or you can pay down. And I always struggle with it because I'm so damn cautious that I would prefer it's in every ounce of me to pay down. Why wouldn't we just take that money and put it on our line of credit that we're paying interest on only?
Madam Treasurer.
Thank you, Worship. So through your Worship to Councillor Taylor. So that is absolutely at Council's discretion if Council chooses to do so. So I'm assuming you're asking for my opinion in this regard.
Yes, please.
So I'll give you two opinions. The first one is why did we take money out of a line of credit, or why did we even go for a line of credit? So that was primarily to finance the transition process from our former police services to OPP. And one of the wisdom of that was, and the way we negotiated, the town staff negotiated the terms of that line of credit is that it'll be interest only for 3 years, and it will align with future cost synergies that we are hoping to see as of 2024. So from my vantage point, really, we are not gaining anything by paying down a line of credit which is interest only, because we are not paying principals yet. The other opinion that I'm going to provide to you is that in the last 3 years that I have had the privilege to serve you as your treasurer, we have traditionally used this annual surplus to balance our upcoming budget, and that takes away the pressure from tax levy and other funding sources. And one of the reasons we have such a robust reserve fund level, as well as a very healthy and respectable debt level, is because we have effectively and very smartly used our annual surplus. So those are my two opinions, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you.
Very good. Thank you. Any further questions, councillors? I had one, Madam Treasurer, and that was the presentation under protection services, which appears to be the consolidation of police and fire. And I'm not sure, is that historically been the way it's been presented? And should it be? I'm just wondering, should we not see what the separate costs are for our police service and our fire department? I'd like to ask you, historically, has this been the way it's been presented, and should we? Because the cost of OPP is something that's under scrutiny, and I think our taxpayers and certainly our councillors are very interested in seeing what that dichotomy is, what that difference is. So.
Thank you, Worship. So through you to the rest of council. So this part and parcel of the audited financial statement is also to report back to the province under the financial information return. So the way we, and when I say we, auditors and treasurers across Ontario, the way we look at financial statement is also to make sure that we are mimicking our financial information return. Just to answer your question more directly, police services and fire services at an aggregate are called protective services. So this is how this has always been done. Should it be shown differently, perhaps outside of the audited financial statement, should council wishes to see the breakdown of that, it can be done through a staff reporting. But as far as the financial statements are concerned, and I'm hoping that our auditor is still around, one of the reasons we do it that way so that we can mirror the financial information return, which is a very prescribed form or document that we have to adhere to.
I understand, but it might be a nice note to have. It could be a note to your financial statement, what that breakdown is, which wouldn't interrupt your, statutory filing that you have to do with the province. So, Mr. Short, do you have a comment on that?
And I just was going to corroborate what Madam Treasurer said, that yes, it is very consistent. All municipalities, I'm not aware of anyways, which do it differently, would report police and fire together under protective services. It is in large part because of the financial information return and the filings with the Ministry of Municipal Affairs and Housing that's done. But to your point, Mr. Mayor, yes, I suppose that it could be split out in a note to the financial statements if that was the preference.
I don't know, councillors, is that of interest to you? It certainly is to me, but maybe you can consider that in the future. It'd be interesting. All right. So we have a motion on the floor here. I think all conversation and questions are complete. Can we have a vote on this? All in favor? All right. Thank you, Madam Treasurer. Thank you, Mr. Short. All the best. Okay, we're going to move on to the 2023 council meeting schedule. So let me pull it up here. Okay, this is a recommendation that reports CPS 2022-031 the 2023 council meeting schedule be received, and that council adopt the 2023 council meeting schedule as outlined in report CPS 2022-031. Can we have a motion for this, please? Councillor Post, seconded by Councillor Sherwood. Any questions, councillors of staff, on this? All in favor? Thank you. Moving on to 12.3, this is council tasks. The recommendation that report CPS 2022-041 council tasks be received. And for those who are listening or watching, this is the list that council had requested staff prepare and keep up to date from time to time, just to see how we're making out on the various tasks that council has charged staff with. Council, let's put a motion on the floor, and then we'll have Councillor Taylor ask his question. Motion, please. Councillor Peters, seconded by Deputy Mayor. All right, Councillor Taylor.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to say, whenever you start to ask someone to do a report, if you went a period of time and the report wasn't produced and no one asks for it, then it was a waste of time. I just wanted to share with everybody, I do read this report. I think it's a great tool for us to keep up on what we're accomplishing as a team. And I just wanted to provide that affirmation for staff that I think there's value here, and I think it's good for the public, for those that are interested to see exactly what's going on. So do we need the report to continue? My vote would be yes. And is it a value out of time, of staff's time to put it together? My statement would be yes. So I just wanted to share that.
Very good. All right, any further comments, council? No, all in favor? Okay, thank you. Moving on to 12.4. All right, this is regarding structural demolitions on listed and non-designated municipal heritage register properties. This is a recommendation that report INS 2022-040 structure demolitions on non-designated municipal heritage register properties be received as information for council. Can we have a motion to receive this report, please? Councillor Sherwood, second by Councillor Andrews. Any questions, council of staff, on this report? Seeing none, all in favor? All right, thank you. All right, moving on to 12.5. This is warming centers and out of the cold program. So this is a report coming back to us out of discussions we had regarding homelessness and other issues with those who find themselves in crisis. The recommendation is that report CMS 2022-03 warming centers out of the cold program be received, and that council provide direction to staff to continue to work collaboratively with Dufferin County Community Services in support of their health and human programs that support the vulnerable members of the community that seek shelter during the cold winter months, based on Climate Change Canada guidelines for severe cold frost warnings. And the council directs staff to work in collaboration with Choices for Youth, where appropriate, to support the delivery of an out of cold program in 2023, and that staff bring forward more details and potential cost scenarios under the 2023 budget deliberations. Can we have a motion to put this on the floor, please? Deputy Mayor McIntosh, seconded by Councillor Post. Mr. Osmond, I wonder if you could weigh in here first, sir, and give us just a little Coles Notes version of this, if you wouldn't mind.
Thank you, Your Worship. Well, first of all, as you know, it's been quite an extensive time period, and it's quite an extensive report. A lot of things have been happening behind the scenes from those who basically deliver on these kinds of services, particularly in the county. And I'm doing a lot of work back and forth with the county on how things have been progressing, because they have been looking at funding another men's shelter in town, which is now being approved as of April 28th. And what that means is that they're providing funding to the Choices for Youth organization so they can actually construct another location. And when that happens, it will trigger for us an opportunity to collaborate with Choices for Youth to deliver a out of the cold program during the winter months. And the reason why we've kind of left it open in the second recommendation is so that we can be able to sit down with these guys and see what exactly we can do to help. I think they have a funding, at least a minimum amount of funding to get the actual site updated. But when you get into the delivery of the program, there may be an opportunity for the town to collaborate and provide some assistance, albeit in kind or some financial assistance. And we need time to discuss that with them as they get things up and running. But there is no doubt, having spoken to the county, that, you know, there will be a system in place, and it would be a matter for us to basically talk to the Choices for Youth group, and we can get a program that we wouldn't have to get involved with facilities or spaces or any of those things. We can actually have some sort of agreement, if you would, if that's what it comes down to, with Choices for Youth to take care of out of the coal is really what the technical program name would be during the winter months, to take care of those that are homeless or are vulnerable and need support.
I remember when it came before us and we were talking about the need for staff, the need for security, and of course Choices is likely going to have all of that in place. So it certainly makes sense for them to take this over, and if they need some financial support from us, we will learn that in the upcoming months. So thank you, Mr. Osmond. Deputy Mayor McIntosh.
Thank you, Worship. I certainly do support this in principle. I'm a little concerned, again, are we stepping on the county's toes as far as this? This is usually something the county would look after. So when the reports do come in, I'd be very interested in seeing what they do say. Again, to me, it's a county issue, but I certainly do support it no matter who's paying for it. I think it's a good idea. Thank you.
Very good. Okay, so we have a motion on the floor to receive this report. All in favor? All right. Thank you, Mr. Osmond. All right, moving on to 12.6. This is, I'm just going to read this recommendation. This is a recommendation that reports CMS 2022-009 titled Fleet Replacement Information Report, which outlines the transition from a Town of Orangeville light-duty in-house fleet management program to a corporate leased ownership, maintenance, and management program with a minimum 10-year projected savings to $368,000, and this report be received. We have a motion to put this on the floor, please. Councillor Andrews, second by Councillor Taylor. All right, any questions, Council, of this? Councillor Andrews, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much, Your Worship. And Mr. Osmond, I see that you're on camera, so I know that this was your report. And I do want to thank you very much in collaboration with the organization that you put this together. A lot of detail, which I'm very impressed about. You know, I take a look at fleets that exist not only within our municipality, and I was really appreciative to see the detail that was highlighted in the report, but just some of the nuances that exist. You know, the opportunity to have specific vehicles where the additions of those specific items that might be needed on one vehicle or two vehicles can in fact be taken off, as part of the process. But also what really caught my eye was the fact of, and I know that our general public may not be aware of what this whole process is all about, and maybe you'll be able to provide just a quick summary, but I was really appreciative to see the EV component, the electric vehicle component, at least under consideration, and that would be embedded within this agreement with Enterprise. The other question I do have is, I know that Enterprise was the entity that was identified in presenting this, but were there any other companies or organizations that specialize in this type of lease agreement?
Thank you, Your Worship, through to Councillor Andrews. Thank you for the comments. First off, the Enterprise program is actually a program under AMO, and it came to us under AMO, under LAS and AMO, which is an agreement that's in place for all municipalities in the province. And basically, it's like a bar group that we can get involved with, and that's how we approached it. We do similar with other like Kinetic and so on and so forth. There's quite a few in the province that we piggyback on. This one was the way we looked at that, and we actually sit down, and you're correct. It's been a very extensive process. It's taken months for us to work all the details and all the bugs out, do all the research, talk to all the municipalities that are doing this right now, and there's quite a long list in the province. But I'll get to your question on EVs. EVs is something new into this market, and in actual fact, this enterprise program has actually done an extensive research now and done surveys and collected data on the EVs and trying to figure out which EV would be the best for the municipal world, particularly for bylaw or police or whatever the case might be. So that's just being finished now. So they are doing legwork right now as we speak on the 2 bylaw vehicles, EV bylaw vehicles for the town, and other vehicles that will come up as time progresses. One of the big benefits of this particular program is that the vehicles can be turned over on a more consistent basis, on an earlier basis, and we get up to date, safe, efficient vehicles. And when the EVs come into the right time frame, they will be coming on as well, and they will do all that kind of legwork, and then we would actually get our vehicles on a rotation basis, and we would be paying out of operations, not out of capital. So as the treasurer says, in all the discussions with the treasurer, she likes to see the cash in our table. So it's a way for us to maintain cash flow and at the same time not be spending capital dollars. And one of the other big benefits I'd like to point out is that there's an economic spinoff to the municipality or to the community itself, to the business in the community. All of the maintenance on all of our vehicles, light duty vehicles, will go to all the maintenance shops in town. It will all stay in town in Orangeville. And for the most part, unless we have to go direct to the manufacturer, and we will if we have to, if the vehicles can be purchased from the dealerships in Mount Pearl, in Orangeville, Mount Pearl, that's the way we would be. That's the way we would be working with it. And so it's quite positive from that perspective.
Yeah, Mr. Osmond, I really like, yeah, thank you. I'm glad you got the right location too as well.
Yeah,
but, I know the economic benefit of those that have support for the automotive repair and that would benefit. And I also like the idea that we're not burdening the mechanic that is part of Public Works, because again, their expertise is on some of the heavy machinery. And lastly, having the endorsement from an efficiency perspective from AMO also is very positive news. So again, thank you for all the work that you've done on this report.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Taylor and then Councillor Peters.
So thank you, Your Worship. Councillor Andrews stole some of my thunder there, but I will say that Mount Pearl is on my list of places to go. So I want to do that. But the other piece I'd like to share is, so I have used this company. I can collaborate or corroborate what Mr. Osmond is saying. There is savings for sure, but there's also something else you didn't mention, sir, and that is the free up of people's time, because having staff manage this versus now the outsourcing piece, it's going to benefit us for sure, right? So thank you, Councillor Andrews, for your comments. You were thinking down the same line I was, and I'll just provide that. So I think it's a great program, and thank you for researching it on our behalf, Mr. Osmond.
Thank you, Councillor Taylor. Councillor Peters.
Thanks, Mr. Mayor. Through you, my comments also a bit of a tangent on Councillor Andrews. Through you to Mr. Osmond, could you comment a little bit more on the vehicle selection piece? When a capital ask comes to council, and we made some motions several years ago to start introducing the EVs into the fleet. Can you just confirm that we're not locked into an enterprise algorithm when it comes to vehicle selection? Like, does the town still have control over the direction it wants to go with those vehicles? Because obviously we're making a push towards to lowering emissions, right?
Absolutely, Councillor Peters. Absolutely, that was a question that came up quite often, actually, in our deliberations with Enterprise and with other municipalities, to assure us that we do have our total flexibility, total control. We don't have to select the vehicles that come up number one on their selection list, or the case might be. We may have some nuances in vehicles that we would like to have, and they would actually go directly for the vehicle that we would be asking for, and we have complete control. We also have complete control of when we get in and get out. This is very open-ended. I'd like to point that out. And Councillor Taylor is quite right. One of the big things about this is the asset management piece. They control all the asset management piece for us, and it is a really indirect savings for us in terms of all the staff time that deals with all that. So that's a really good point. But with the EVs in particular, we're quite, looking at that in quite a different light, because there's something new coming to our table, and it's not just in the bylaw area. We're also going to be looking at in the fire area and also in some of the maintenance areas that we're working on right now. And we are also looking at that to see if there's something we can do in our transit system. So we're looking at all areas that can be utilized. The other thing, of course, is we have to keep in mind that this is a collaboration between two departments because we don't have fleet managers in our system, so we basically do it directly. So between infrastructure services and community services, we'll look at both of these pieces, and we'll keep things moving as a joint departmental collaboration.
So as a follow-up, if you don't mind, Mr. Mayor, do we need something, Mr. Osmond, internally to direct that vehicle choice? Obviously, we're making those strides, and I trust your department is making those decisions, in the interest of the SNAP and that sort of thing. But would it help, or is it necessary to have a more formal direction in terms of that vehicle selection, or should we just step back and assume that things are headed in that direction?
Your Worship, back to Councillor Peters. If council would like to have us provide some sort of a report of sorts to say how we would direct or how we would get vehicles from an EV perspective and get your input, that can happen. We would get it. Actually, we're waiting now for a report back from Enterprise on their findings on their across North America research they've done on EVs. And it might be quite beneficial to take a look at it. And maybe from that, there might be some direction that you would support or not support, or provide some other direction on. We're certainly wide open on that in that regard.
I certainly don't want to add more reports to staff's plate at the moment. I just wondered if it was something as simple as, the vehicles that would be under a more traditional fleet that would be combustion engine, for example. If your department might have a goal, or if other councillors had a date in mind that 100% of that fleet be electric by, some date. And again, we don't have to hash it out immediately, but a simple statement or a goal like that might be worthwhile in terms of, making those choices moving forward.
Just to touch on that again, Councillor Peters, I mean, we do have SNAP under review right now, looking at the first major review of SNAP. And it might be something we can actually incorporate in that document to give us some direction through that document that we can certainly work from. That'll be quite useful.
Yeah, that's a good point. Okay, thank you.
Mr. Osmond, thank you for bringing this to us. Very comprehensive report, very interesting, and whenever there's some cost savings. And I presume the turnover of vehicles is going to be fairly frequent, is it here? What are you talking about in terms of turnover?
The turnover of vehicles they'll fluctuate depending on where they're being used and how often they're being used and the time frames what they're being used for. But anywhere from 2 years to 5 years to 6 years, primarily 4 to 5 years. And again, remember, it's an equity lease, so all the funds the money we put into these vehicles, it's equity we put in. When they go resell, we get the equity back. So it's really important that we consider this is not a lease where we spend the money and we don't see no money for it. When these vehicles get rotated out, they get sold, and we get the equity back into our system, which keeps our dollars and costs down and increases our savings on the back end.
Very good. Well, we have this on the floor now. If there's no further questions of council, all in favor? Thank you, Mr. Osmond.
Thank you.
Okay, moving on to item 13. This is correspondence. We had correspondence of some residents on College Avenue, one in favor of opening up College Avenue, one in favor of not opening up, and then also Town of Amaranth Municipal Comprehensive Review regarding boundary expansions of municipalities within Dufferin County, City of Cambridge, free public transportation on Election Day motion, and then a letter from Mr. Ghilardi from Cache Developments. So can we have a motion to receive all of this correspondence, please? Councillor Peters, second from Councillor Post. All in favor?
Point
Any comments? Any comments? Go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to talk about the Grand Valley resolution document, and to me, I don't know why the 7 of us would support such a thing. The reality is this is talking about land boundaries and potential benefits for Orangeville, and they're essentially saying in this letter that they're not in agreement with that. I don't sit on county council. I don't have the background of what is actually being described here, but I don't know if we should be signing off on that in a positive way. It would be good for us to gain if we can.
Of course, but I think under correspondence, this is the receipt of a letter from them. I don't know that it's, you know, us accepting the contents of the letter. We certainly have other letters there. So
Yeah, I just want to
yeah,
make.
I agree with you, Councillor Taylor. You know, the boundary of Orangeville is something that is fluid, I think, and certainly after the Dufferin County comprehensive review that said Grand Valley, Shelburne, and Orangeville are going to have to grow. You know, our neighboring municipalities are going to have to come to understand that this may happen, and I agree with you. So,
I agree with you. Yeah,
very good.
Thank you.
All right, so Council, we just have a motion here to receive these documents. All in favor? All right, thank you. Moving on, we have now some committee and board minutes to receive. We have 14.1, which is the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Committee minutes of April 14th. We also have the Joint Accessibility Advisory Committee meetings of April the 1st, 2022. We have a motion to receive those minutes, please. Councillor Andrews, seconded by Councillor Taylor. Any comments on those minutes? Any questions? No. All in favor? All right. Moving on now to notice of motion prior to meeting. There is none, but we do have 15.1 from Councillor Andrews. Councillor Andrews, over to you, sir.
Yeah, thank you very much. I will end up asking Madam Clerk to come in to provide some guidance as I will be moving ahead with this. But Madam Clerk, if you would be so kind to tell me what my next steps are.
Through you, Mr. Mayor, members of council will see on the agenda that there are three recommended motions. The way that the reason it's laid out in such a form is because firstly, you'll see the first recommendation that is to waive a notice. That notice be waived to introduce a motion to reconsider the council resolution number 2022-192, which is pertaining to the Cache Developments Orangeville Inc. Blocks 94 and 98, Plan 7M70, follow up to Ontario Land Tribunal approval and council direction. So firstly, before Councillor Andrews' motion can go forward with respect to looking at the original motion, first we have to waive notice to put forward the reconsideration. Secondly, you'll see the second recommendation, which is with respect to actually reconsidering the motion. And then thirdly is actually discussing the original motion, putting that back on the floor for actual consideration of the members. So it's laid out like that just to provide some clarity in terms of the steps that that are required in order for the reconsideration to move forward.
Okay, thank you. So, Councillor Andrews, do you wish to make a motion that notice be waived?
Yes.
All right, I'll second that. All right, all in favor? And opposed? So Taylor and McIntosh are opposed. That motion passes 5-2 with a 2/3 majority. Thank you. All right, moving on to the second recommendation. This is a recommendation that we would, well, you go ahead, Councillor Andrews, on this, please.
As following the directive from the clerk, the recommendation here is a council resolution number 2022-192 pertaining to the Cache Developments Orangeville Inc. Blocks 94 and 98, Plan 7M-70. Follow up to the Ontario Land Tribunal approval and council direction be reconsidered. And so, Your Worship, I presume you would end up asking for.
I will second that. I will second that motion.
Okay, thank you.
All right. All right. All in favor of reconsidering this motion? And opposed? We have Post, McIntosh, and Taylor opposed. That motion passes by simple majority. All right. Moving on then. I'll read this full recommendation. Councillor Andrews, again, the report INS 2022-037 Cache Developments Orangeville Inc. Blocks 94 and 98, Plan 7M-70 follow-up to Ontario Land Tribunal. Approval and council direction be received, and that based on the information presented this report and report INS 2022-038 having been submitted in response to council's direction on March 21st, 2022. With respect to this matter, the council direct the town solicitor to submit to the Ontario Land Tribunal for final approval and enactment the official plan amendment number 130 and the zoning bylaw amendment included as attachments numbers 1 and 2 to this report. So Councillor Andrews is making this motion. I will second that motion. All right, let's open it up for any discussion or comments, councillors. Councillor Andrews, go ahead.
Yeah, thank you very much. And the reason I bring this motion to council is at the time of the original agenda item to council on May 16th, I personally had reservations on supporting the bylaw request despite all of the work that was conducted by town staff and the various points that were referenced pertaining to the OLT and possible legal implications if not approved. On May 25th, the developer provided details as for their timelines regarding the proposed development with the clarity I was personally looking for. That's the reason for this motion to be presented.
All right, thank you. Any other comments, councillors, before we vote on this matter? All right. All in favor of the reconsideration of this vote? All right, we have 4 and opposed. We have Councillor Post, Councillor Taylor. Sorry, Councillor McIntosh, did you vote? You're opposed or you're with it? You're opposed.
Opposed.
You're opposed? Okay. All right, Madam Clerk, we have McIntosh, Taylor, and Post opposed. That motion passes. Thank you, councillors. All right, moving on to notice of motion at meeting. Councillors, any notice of motions? Hearing none. Any new business? Councillors? Councillor Andrews and then Councillor Post.
Councillor Post, I think she beat me to.
All right.
Yeah, so
you had your hand up, but she did light up first.
I know, that's okay.
Councillor Post, go right ahead.
Thank you very much, Mr. Mayor. I just wanted to let the council know that today I was really pleased to join Mayor Brown in front of Town Hall for the proclamation of Accessibility Week. This is an important week, and as part of this important week, we were able to recognize 2 amazing organizations, Branching Out Support Services and Active Lives Canada, as well as being able to recognize Kim Van Ryn, the Executive Director for Branching Out Support Services, and all of them were awarded with Accessibility Champion Awards. These organizations and all the great people who work there are doing absolutely incredible work in making our community a more inclusive place by providing important resources and skills training and skills development for people in our community who need it the most. And that was really apparent, as Mayor Brown, I'm sure, can corroborate, as we saw the smiling faces of all the people who are participants of those organizations who were so thrilled to be a part of our celebration today. And I just wanted to take a moment to congratulate those organizations and continue to encourage them to keep doing the great work that they're doing in our community. And thank you for the proclamation today, Mayor Brown.
Yeah, that was very nice to be there, and you know, these folks working behind the scenes, helping those folks that are in need. You know, hats off. And again, your awards today, Councillor Post, underline that they really do great work. All right, Councillor Andrews, go ahead, sir.
Thank you, and kudos to Ms. Van Ryn. She does tremendous work as all the other organizations that were recognized. We do have a big event that is coming up this coming weekend, which is the Orangeville Blues and Jazz Festival. I know that many people within our community should be aware of it, and I know that many of us on council will be attending the various performances and taking in all the festivities, which is, after a couple of years, so nice to see back in town. I did get a call late this morning requesting last-minute volunteers, even though there was a significant number of volunteers that ended up attending the volunteer coordination and orientation. But there is an urgent call for some volunteers. So if anyone who happens to be watching, who may have someone in the household that would like to maybe step up and provide some support, they can contact the Orangeville Blues and Jazz Festival directly, and they will certainly welcome your commitment to volunteering at the event at some time over the weekend.
Right, maybe I could also suggest town staff maybe put out a communication on our channels, social media channels, and invite counselors to do the same on their, social media to ask for volunteers for our Blues and Jazz Festival. All right, Councillor Post again, go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor Brown. I have one more that I wanted to bring up, realizing what the date is. On Wednesday, it is the beginning of Pride Month, and we will be celebrating for the first time in a couple of years with a public flag raising in front of Town Hall. So I just wanted to put an invitation out to the public to join us for the official proclamation of Pride Month at 9 a.m. at Town Hall.
Very good. Thank you, Councillor Post. Any other new business, councillors? All right, seeing none, let's move down here to our bylaw. This is a bylaw to confirm the proceedings of the Council of the Corporation of the Town of Orangeville at its closed and regular council meeting held on May 30th, 2022. Can we have a motion on that, please?
Sorry, Mr. Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry, Carolina.
There's just the question period portion.
Oh. Wow.
If we could just go one up, please. Thank you.
Apologies. I'm sorry. Ms. Pormancherry or Madam Clerk, are there any folks online that wish to ask questions?
Through you, Worship, there's no callers currently on the line right now.
Okay. All right. My apologies for skipping by that, but we'll move on then to our confirmatory bylaw. So I've already read it. Can we have a motion on that bylaw, please? Councillor Peters, second by Councillor Sherwood. All in favor? And a motion to adjourn, please. Deputy Mayor, Councillor Andrews, all in favor? All right, folks, enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.
Night all.
Good night, everyone.
Right.